In section 5.3, we're going to learn about factoring. So you can write some trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c as the product of two binomials. So really what we've done the first half of this chapter is I give you those two binomials. To get it to a trinomial, we FOIL it, simplify, and we have our answer. So we know how to go from a binomial to a trinomial, but how do we go the other way? So that's really what we're going to learn about in the second half of this chapter. And before we get started, you want to make sure you have this clearly in your notes. All trinomials follow this form, ax squared plus bx plus c, and we're going to be referring to a, b, and c a lot, so let's talk about what those are. A refers to the coefficient that's with your x squared term. B represents the coefficient with your x term, and c is your constant term or just the number with no variable with it. And today, or in section 5.3, we're going to talk about trinomials where that a value is 1, so we don't really see a number there. Factoring gets a little bit trickier when your a value is like 2 or 3 or just anything other than 1, so we're going to save that for 5.4. So to start, I want to know what is the factored form of x squared plus 8x plus 15. So I'm going to go from the trinomial to a product of two binomials. And to start, or really what I'm asking myself is what two numbers multiply to give me 15 and add up to give me 8? To do that, we're going to make an AC chart. So what do I mean by that? We need to figure out what our A, B, and C values are. Our A value, we don't really see anything, so we know that that's 1. Our B value is positive 8, and our C value is positive 15. And where this chart comes in handy is I want two numbers that multiply to give me whatever A times C is, which here is 1 times 15, and adds up to my B value, which is 8. Now 1 times anything is just itself, so I really just want two numbers that multiply to give me 15, add up to give me 8. And where this chart comes in handy is if we don't know those factors off the top of our head, it's helpful to kind of write these down in an organized way. So I want to know the factors of 15. I'm going to start with 1 times 15. 1 times 15 obviously gives me 15. Now I want to think, what is 1 plus, and also 3 times 5 gives me 15. So now I want to figure out what pair of those adds up to give me 8. 1 plus 15 gives me 16, so that's not going to work. 3 plus 5 gives me 8, so those are the two numbers that I want to work with. So my final answer would be x plus 3 times x plus 5. And if I wanted to double check, I could FOIL this and I would see I get my original problem. In answering our original question, 3 times 5 gives me 15, 3 plus 5 gives me 8. Now these get a little bit trickier when you work negatives into this. So now I want to know what is the factored form of x squared minus 11x plus 24. So my a value is 1, my b value is negative 11, and my c value is 24. So making my chart, I want two numbers that multiply to give me 1 times 24, which is just 24, and adds up to give me negative 11. And you might be thinking, how do we get one positive answer and one negative answer? You want to keep in mind that a negative times a negative will give you a positive, so that means that all of my factored values of 24, I want to make both negative. So instead of thinking of, 1 times 24 gives me 24, I'm going to make them both negative, because again, I want my two numbers to add up to give me a negative value. Negative 1 times negative 24 gives me positive 24. Then let's look and see what they add up to. Negative 1 plus negative 24 gives me negative 25. I want two numbers that add up to give me negative 11, so that's not going to work. So I'll move on. 24 is an even number, so I know it divides by 2. So instead of saying 2 times 12, I'm going to go negative 2 times negative 12. Negative 2 plus negative 12 gives me negative 14. Still not negative 11, so that's not going to work either. 24 divides by 3, so I know 3 times 8 will work, so I'm going to write negative 3 times negative 8. Negative 3 plus negative 8 gives me negative 11, so that's my answer. So my final answer here is I'm going to write in factored form x minus 3 times x minus 8. Let's look at one more example. I want to know what is the factored form of x squared plus 2x minus 15. So I want two numbers that multiply to give me negative 15 and add up to give me 2. Now notice that since my two numbers multiplied are going to be negative, one number should be negative, one should be positive, because a negative and a positive multiplied stays negative. So this means that we're going to look at more options here, because if I start with 1 and 15, I could put the negative with the 1, or I could put the negative with the 15. And I need to consider both options, because when I add both of those numbers together, I get two different answers. Negative 1 plus 15 gives me positive 14. 1 plus negative 15 gives me negative 14. Neither of those work because I wanted to add up to 2, but again, notice that they add up to different things. The only other factors of 15 are 3 and 5, so I need to consider negative 3 times 5 and 3 times negative 5. When I add both of those together, negative 3 plus 5 gives me 2, 3 plus negative 5 gives me negative 2, so that first one's going to be what I go with because I want two numbers that add up to give me positive 2. Now, in factored form, my answer would be x minus 3 times x plus 5.